the broadcast. I'm in the company of SAMMY OKELLO, and I go by the name DAPHNE ORINA. Now tonight we have a lot in store for you, including an interview on climate change, the COP summit that happened recently and culminated today in Egypt. We'll be talking about that. Make sure you stick around to the end of this broadcast to catch that particular conversation. For now, let's get started. Now, the United Democratic Alliance National Elections Board Chairman Anthony Mwaura has been appointed by President William Ruto to chair the board of the Kenya Revenue Authority. Mwaura will now replace Ambassador Francis Muthaura, for a 3-year term at the apex of the Tax Collectors Board. Other appointments made today include that of Amesi Mwashobo, who will be the chairperson of the Kenya Maritime Authority. David Wamatsi heads to the Council of the Kenya Utalii College, and retired General Joseph Kipto will head the Kenya Meat Commission, while James Waure heads the Lake Basin Development Authority. Elsewhere, Nairobi Governor Johnson Sakaja has suspended 3 officers following the collapse of a building in Kasarani, Nairobi, which led to 3 people's deaths. The 3 were also given a show cause notice, and if they don't respond to the allegations, which include insufficient supervision, within 10 days, additional disciplinary action will be taken against them. In a statement to newsrooms, the Nairobi County government also said it has since forwarded the names of the officers to the Directorate of Criminal Investigations for further probe. In other news, Sirisia Member of Parliament John Waluke has been granted a 10 million shillings cash bail pending the hearing and determination of his appeal against a 67-year jail term sentence imposed on him of a 297 million shillings fraud. Waluke had earlier on filed an appeal to the High Court to challenge his jail term, which he described as a harsh and unwarranted term.
Sirisia MP John Waluke has an opportunity to smile again after being freed on a 10 million cash bail after he appealed against his severe sentence of 67 years imprisonment. The judgment has raised alarm to other suspects faced with corruption cases, especially politicians and top government officials. Waluke and Wahungu, through the Arid Supplies and General Contracts Limited Company, a company where the two are shareholders, were supposed to supply 40,000 metric tons of maize to the National Cereals and Produce Board in 2004, but ended up pocketing 297 million Kenyan shillings set aside for the contract. Despite the Sirisia lawmaker being freed on a cash bail, he still insists that the government owes him 300 million Kenyan shillings, stemming from a 2004 maize supply deal that prosecutors claim was fake. A 3-judge bench comprising Justices Asike Mahandia, Grace Ngeni and Sankale Ole Kantai said with regards to the law, keeping the MP behind bars may lead to the loss of his parliamentary seat, hence triggering a by-election. Israel Omwe, KUTV.
Also, President William Ruto has today commissioned DAPHNE steel mills in Kwale County. The 30 billion shillings plant, with more than 1,000 employees, is one of the largest in the region and will save the country foreign exchange of more than 60 billion shillings a year. The head of state has said that the government is keen on elevating Kenya to the global iron and steel value chain. He assured investors of the government support, including the elimination of brokers and abolishment of punitive levies and taxes.
Speaking on a commission DAPHNE stillness in Kwale County, the head of state has voted to reverse all ills committed by individuals and improve contribution of industrialization to the GDP of the country. According to President Ruto, the contribution of industrialization to the country's GDP has dropped from 9% to 7% in the last 5 years.
Kwa miaka mitano tumerudisha chini percentage ya mambo ya viwanda ama contribution ya industrialization kutoka 9% ya GDP mpaka imerudi nyuma mpaka 7% ya GDP. Watu wachache wanafanya urafiki na wafanyikazi wa serikali kuangaisha viwanda zetu.
The president has pledged to introduce a framework that promotes the industrialization sector, creates jobs for the country's citizen, and saves the foreign exchange. The president observed that the consumption of steel will spike as the government embarks on its infrastructure, manufacturing, and affordable housing programs.
Mimi nataka niwaambie wale wengine wote ambao wako tayari kuegeza katika taifa letu la Kenya ya kwamba tutatengeneza environment, tutaweka sera ambayo itahakikisha ya kwamba uwegezaji wao inawapatia.
The head of state acknowledged that there are challenges producing enough food for the whole country, but said the government is in the process of buying food from other countries, even as it supports Kenyans to produce enough food. The president said that the government will seek to increase land and irrigation in the country to increase production.
Tunaelewa ya kwamba tuko na matatizo ya chakula, na vile mmesikia hapa tumesema hatua yetu ya kwanza tutaagiza chakula kutoka nchi zingine, tutanunua chakula tulete hapa Kenya, wakati pia tunawasaidia wakulima wetu wazalishe chakula zaidi. Tumekubaliana tunaweka pesa ya serikali karibu bilioni 10 kupanga mambo ya mbolea.
Investors have been assured of the government support, including the elimination of brokers and abolishment of punitive levies and taxes. Joseph Thuko, KTV.
Moving on, fake Dr. James Mugondishu, alias Dr. Mugo wa Wairimo, has been convicted of 10 accounts relating to operating an illegal medical facility and unlawfully administering drugs to his patients. In one of the accounts, the court found him guilty of administering drugs to a woman with the intention of sexually assaulting her. Milimani Chief Magistrate Wendy Micheni on Thursday ruled that the victim positively identified the suspect as her assailant and that she had no reason to frame him. Now, the CBC task force has today completed collecting views from the public in all the 47 counties. The 42-member working party chaired by Professor Raphael Munavu commenced public engagements on Tuesday, November 1st and finalized on November 11th this year. The team is expected to elaborate on the recommendations of key tenets in the curriculum and put into consideration the public views collected.
President Ruto on Friday, 30 September 2022, appointed a task force to evaluate the competency-based curriculum CBC in the country. The working party was to collect views and opinions from different stakeholders in the education sector across all the 47 counties. Mixed reactions were witnessed during the engagement, with 5 issues raised, including expensive nature of CBC, learners' safety when transitioning to secondary schools, lack of infrastructure facilities, inadequate teacher learning resources, and teacher competency. Recommendations made to the CBC task force are as follows: grade 7 and 8 to be primary schools teachers holding diplomas and degrees or senior teachers in primary school to teach grade 7 and grade 8, Grade 9, 10, 11 and 12 to be in the secondary schools. All schools to be funded to be able to cater for the 2 pathways in grade 11. Teachers pay for the lowest job group to be paid basic salary of 35,000 Kenya shillings and group 2 to start at 70,000 Kenya shillings among other recommendations. With today being the last day for the committee to submit its report, education stakeholders will now shift their attention to the Ministry of Education to see if their opinions will be put into consideration. Joseph Thuko, KUTV.
Moving on swiftly, speaking in Kisumu County where he met school principals and education directors, Education Cabinet Secretary Ezekiel Machogu has reaffirmed the government's preparedness in holding credible national exams. The CS assured that the integrity of the national exams will not be compromised. National examinations will commence from 28th of this month with a total of 3.3 million candidates expected to sit for the exam.
Education Cabinet Secretary Ezekiel Machogu has assured Kenyans of credibility in the upcoming national examinations, which he says have already been dispatched across the country. Addressing principals from Kisii and Nyamira counties at Kisii School, the CS ruled out any cheating or irregularities, saying the vice was long eliminated after the government switched their printing abroad.
The Kenyan government decided that printing has to be done in the UK. Papers are flown to Nairobi, International Airport, under very tight security.
The CS revealed that the government has identified and sealed all previous loopholes that could lead to the papers being compromised, adding that any infringement shall be dealt with decisively. Machogu warned that the focus of the exams will be on the papers at distribution centers where early exposure had been the bone of contention.
I will give the Kenyans an assurance, which again I'm going to repeat here, that it must be 100% success. I will give an assurance to the President of the Republic of Kenya and the entire cabinet.
According to him, any premature exposure of the exams will land the center managers or security personnel into trouble with dire consequences.
This time round, we have devised a system where there will be personal accountability from each and every one of us. Saying that if it is the center manager, you have to account and sign a form that actually all went well.
The only personnel who will be granted access to exam centers include the school heads, who are the center managers, and one deputy, supervisors, invigilators, gatekeepers, and essential support staff such as cooks. The exam season kicked off today with KCSA rehearsals, which will be followed by oral and practicals to be done between 21st and 25th this month, before sitting for the written papers from 28th November to 23rd of next month. The Pioneer CBC Grade 6 class and those in Class 8 will have their rehearsals in a week's time, then sit for their exams in 3 days from 28th to 30th November. A total of 3.3 million candidates have registered for the papers, with 1.3 million in Grade 6, another 1.2 million in Class 8, and the rest in Form 4. Dennis Omoli, KUTV.
Now, nations rather are sharply split over funds to help developing countries deal with the effects of climate change as the United Nations climate talks come to an end. And as the COP27 negotiations come to a halt, a significant disagreement has come out over the idea of gradually phasing out the use of all fossil fuels to prevent global temperatures from rising.
As negotiating teams attempt to reach a consensus on a number of challenging issues, there is a palpable sense of urgency in the Red Sea resort of Sharm el-Sheikh. An outline of a paper that summarizes the positions of various nations has been provided by the Egyptian presidency after 2 weeks of negotiations at the COP27. The issue is known as loss and damage in the framework of UN talks. The big sticking point in loss and damage is the need for a new fund to help countries deal with the immediate impacts of climate change. Rich countries have resisted the discussion for over 30 years, fearing that since they played a major role in causing climate change, they will have to pay for it for centuries to come. However, the effects of recent flooding in Pakistan, Nigeria and other places has tilted the scales. Drought is hitting the nation of Tuvalu hard, while at the same time the rising seas are threatening its future as a nation. The conversations continue to be very challenging. The EU has said it will pay 100 million euros to help damaged countries.
What needs
The UN climate process is being hampered by Presidents Biden and Xi Jinping's lack of tangible areas of cooperation, despite some thawing of relations between the two leaders of the world's two largest polluters following their recent meeting. Scientists believe that a temperature increase of 1.5 C marks the point at which global warming becomes extremely dangerous. However, there has been considerable concern that the idea's support will be weakened, particularly because India and China were concerned that it was no longer scientifically possible. For KUTV, I am Susan Wayaki.
Well, at that we take our first break right here on KUTV Primetime News. Stick around, for we are coming up with an interview to follow up on Susan Wayaki's story on the COP27 Climate Summit, which has culminated today in Egypt. We want to know what is happening. Are we getting to the goal of eradicating these climate change effects that are being felt worldwide? Stick around, we're coming back in a moment.
Vera Beauty and Fashion College is focused on being the leading technical and vocational training institute in the region. Our team possesses in-depth knowledge and extensive experience in the industry, offering thorough training in cosmetology, hairdressing, interior design, creative arts, training of trainers, nail technology, and fashion design. With branches in Nairobi, Thika, Meru, Eldoret, and now in Mombasa, our courses ensure that learners are completely equipped with knowledge, competency, and employability skills. Enroll today to be a part of a center of excellence.
Today I am at Jua e-bikes. So if you look at our bike, it's quite competitive compared to Boda Boda, which is currently used especially for delivery riders. This is because unlike a motorbike, you don't have to use fuel. So you basically need to use 12 shillings just to charge the full battery to operate within a day.
This is the battery. Every battery has its own key. So you put it in, you unlock. So you get it out. You can take it back in. Okay, you get it for the purpose, the charging purpose. This is increasing the speed, reducing the speed.
Leo nitakuwa ana kwa ana na wale wajadi kabisa, yule ambaye aliteuliwa kuwa mganga wa tiba asilia.
Kwanza alikuwa Mkristo.
Aha,
alipokuwa Mkristo akazaa watoto, wale watoto wake wote amewazaa wakiwa ni Mkristo.
Naam.
So ikatokea siku moja akiwa kwa Ukristo akashikwa na ugonjwa, hakuweza kula kwa miezi miwili.
Ukiwa na dukuduku la michezo, tunafungua sanduku la dukuduku kufahamu zaidi. Kila danadana, mitimpo, Mifyatuko na harakati zote ugani, sisi ni wako mwandani. Kukurukakara zote nyanjani, jezi kuangaziwa zaidi ya micharazo michezoni. Mimi mwanaspoti wako matata Peter Pinches Mwaora, na kuwa na jopo lenye maarifa sufufu, nikufahamishe na nikuburudishe wewe shabiki shakiki, uhakiki na kindakindaki.
Maelfu na maelfu ya wahamiaji wakiwa na watoto kutoka nchi za Amerika ya Kati wanaendelea kuwasili kwenye mpaka kati ya Marekani na Mexico.
Folks are going. Thank you very, very much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Ni habari kutoka pembe zote duniani.
People pass kuvugu. People pass ni idea.
Kazini ananyonya, hanyonyi vizuri, anakuwa hayuko comfortable.
Jeshi la Jamhuri ya Kidemokrasia ya Kongo linapambana na waasi wa ADF.
Kwa sasa wanatoa wito kwa mashirika, makampuni na vile vituo vya uchukuzi.
Mambo mengi yatakwenda kama yalivyopangwa.
Hapa ni kuna mmoja wa viongozi wa chama cha wavuvi katika eneo hili.
Zaidi tunajaribu kuwapa chanjo ili ina boost ama inanyanyua kinga ya mwili, hiyo inaenda kupelekea kupambana na virusi.
Ni duniani leo, Jumatatu mpaka Ijumaa, moja kwa moja kutoka VOA Swahili, Washington DC.
I agree with you that there is that aspect that longevity in power could lead to aspect of dictatorship which will kill a country or which will kill a nation. Like we can have the example of Mobutu Sese Seko and the other people who have been in power for too long. Even Nigeria, I think, had something of the sort. For Zimbabwe.
Welcome back. Let's now get into the conversation of the night. 6 years ago at the United Nations Climate Conference, COP21, world leaders adopted the Paris Agreement, a commitment to keep global warming below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels and preferably limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. This is the target that scientists agree will substantially reduce the harmful effects of climate change. As of now, even as the world leaders gathered recently in Egypt at the United Nations Climate Conference COP27, we are not on track to hit this goal even if all countries succeed in reducing their national emissions at the levels they have pledged. Currently, nations are sharply split over funds to help developing countries deal with the effects of climate change as the UN climate talks come to an end. And now, a significant disagreement has come out over the idea of gradually phasing out the use of all fossil fuels to prevent global temperatures from rising. Why haven't we achieved this target, and why is Africa the worst hit, yet it only contributes 4% of the world's total greenhouse gas emissions? Duncan Omwami, a UNESCO research fellow, joins us now to tell us why and why now it is termed as the failed summit. Welcome to Studio, Duncan. Thank you for joining us. I'd like you to introduce yourself to our viewers and tell them who you are.
Okay, thank you, Daphne. My name is Duncan Mwami. I'm a research fellow in the Office of the UNESCO Chair on higher education development for greener economy and sustainability, and a rising PhD student in the Department of Environmental Studies and Community Development in Kenyatta University. It is a privilege that I'm getting the conversation coming out, and equally now that the discussions from the COP27 are coming to almost an end. The final decision will be given this Sunday. The last 2 weeks we've been having these discussions keenly all over the same, and I've been able to follow the discussions literally from how they started and how the decisions are going to be made.
Duncan, before you tell us what you've been following up on, because we'd like to hear it from the horse's mouth, tell us first what we mean by this COP27. You know, many people maybe wouldn't know even what we are talking about.
Okay, DAPHNE, COP27 is an African COP, as they call it. This is a COP that has been scheduled to happen in Africa. The last time COP happened in Africa was in 2016, which happened in Morocco. And this time round it was a time for Africa to host COP. And then we were calling it the African COP, since the pertinent issues that were being discussed in this COP were directly reflecting to the interest of the Africans. And that is why we called it the African COP.
Talk to us about these, these pertinent issues that we are talking about now that we are seeing a lot of, demonstrations regarding fundings.
The discussions that were coming up on this COP27 were 4 pertinent issues that were raised to the chair of the UNFCCC, who doubles as the chair of, who is the advisor to COP27 presidency. And coming to Egypt, as COP27 was described, is there are 4 pertinent issues that were raised. 2 were coming from Africa and 2 were coming from the G77 group, and China included. So the 4 pertinent issues were, the first one was adaptation finance that was discussed in detail, and secondly was loss and damage that we lost as African. Then the third one was adaptation and measure, and then the last one was Africa as a continent of special needs and special circumstances.
Thank you so much, Duncan. So why is this adaptation finance becoming a point that is sparking a lot of interest right now? Why is it so important? Why is it causing so much unrest among the nations?
The adaptation finance, depending on the situation, on how the different countries have been gained to have contributed to the emissions of greenhouse gases to the space. They're coming about when we look at the reflections of what the conference COP26 had agreed in Glasgow. They said that since Africa is a country that emits about 4% of the global gases, but recently we were told we've been able to increase from 4 to 6%. So the other countries like the G77, where China and the US emits about 89% of the global emissions. So this is where the discussions were coming about, that the adaptation finance should be given to the African nations so that we will be able to cope with the devastating effects of climate change that we can see from the northern parts of Kenya. This is clearly coming out. Droughts are all over. We have lack of water. Africans are dying of hunger. Africans are dying of not getting nutritious food because of the effects that have been caused by these nations.
Now, Duncan, you mentioned that the carbon emissions in Africa have risen from 4 to 6%, and we had a COP26 summit. What happened during this span of time, and why wouldn't these nations in Africa mitigate these greenhouse gas emissions so that we would have prevented these adverse effects and maybe these financial adaptation crises that we have now?
The thing to get back to you, Africa is in a position to adapt itself and mitigate the effects of this climate change that is coming about. But remember from the records, from the the 5th and the 6th report of the IPCC, we realized that we only contribute 6%. And getting to mitigate and have adaptation measures for these 6%, Africa is at a position. But the problem comes like now, the global emissions that contributes to about 89% coming from the big nations, the G77 and China, US equally included, are causing a lot of harm to us. We are acting as a solution to them. We are having our carbon, we are acting as carbon sinks to them. They pollute, we sequester. So this is what the discussions of adaptation coming in. Since you produce more of the emissions and we produce less, and the impact is that we are the people who are providing solutions to you. So this is why we are fighting for adaptation finance to reach the African. Following the proceedings of COP26, the adaptation finance was agreed to be, or was calculated to be, $20 billion, and now according to negotiations we were able to secure that this to be increased to $40 billion US dollars.
But Duncan, these developed countries are, setting up resistance in, giving this financial support, given that they are the ones actually giving out the most emissions. Why is this the case?
The thing, getting to this concern, they don't want to be held accountable. The nations, if you look at whatever is happening in China, whatever is happening in the US, these are the countries sometimes back, especially China, was almost in the same level where Kenya today is. But they've industrialized at a very quick level. Depending on the scenarios of how the funds and these people are not getting to be responsible. The problem is now they cause the issue and they're not ready to pay these because they are not directly being affected. Our people in Africa are being affected and they don't have the interest of Africa, and this is what actually raised the fourth agenda. Africa being a continent of special needs and special circumstances. We have all the resources, we have all the capacity to do everything, but now the problem is we are not at a position to industrialize ourselves because of poverty levels, maybe governance issues that are coming about, all about. But the concern coming out clearly is our leaders are not ready to have negotiations with these countries so that we stand at a point that we can fight for the interest of the Africans.
Duncan, just to clarify, these fundings that the African countries are calling for, will they be given in terms of grants, loans, or what are we looking at?
From the negotiations we had, I was able to go to follow up the negotiations by the G77 and China included the US. Funding adaptation finance equally bringing about the concern of loss and damage. When we got to the position to agree, we realized that the G77 was taking a different position. We agree, but when we go for breaks and when we come back, they disagree. They take a different position. They are not interested to fund for the loss and the damage that they've caused into the African continent. It is because that our leaders have bilateral agreements, and the grants that are coming into these are coming in terms of loans and not payment for loss and damage. I remember clearly our president, Dr. William Samoei Ruto, was able to secure 500 billion Kenyan shillings between the bilateral agreement between Kenya and the UK. This came as in form of a loan, and this is why we were on the streets of Sharm el-Sheikh to demonstrate that let the finances not come into the bilateral agreements, but rather let the finances be channeled through a facility that will be able to be responsible over the same. And this was proposed that the UNFCCC, that is the organizer of the COPs and the COP27 to be responsible over the same, DAPHNE.
Well put, Duncan. Now that we are talking about resistance to funding, they are resisting to fund the African nations. Have they then given measures and to mitigate these, emissions and adaptation measures, perhaps?
The measures are very clear. The adaptations are very clear. This comes through the Paris Agreement, Article 6, and specifically to look at Article 6, this is Article 6.4, Article 6.2 and Article 6.4 that clearly states the measures and equally how these measures should be funded, and this is what is yielding the adaptation finance. We have three issues that are coming up. There is the adaptation finance coming up, and there is adaptation and measures coming up. The adaptation and measures are very clear. But now the problem is, are they willing to be at a position that they fund for those adaptation? So that is where the problem is coming up.
And as they say, it is easier said than done. Well, at this way that we are going, we are seeing actually emissions, greenhouse gas emissions from various countries, go up due to industrialization. Do we then have hope for really eliminating this climate crisis?
The solution, DAPHNE, is with us. And we as the Africans, if we get together, we must have a solution. I remember very well when we had put pressure so much in the streets of Sharm el-Sheikh, it came clearly that there are issues that had already been dropped at the negotiation room, and they were forwarded to the ministerial level so that we were to put and influence our ministers who were to come into the negotiations to come clearly to take the measures out of this. I believe that we the Africans, we have the solutions by ourselves. If we wake up and find where the rain started beating us, then we are going to have the solutions. Remember, sometimes the countries like Singapore, China, who are sometimes in the same level, where are they today? It is because they found and got a solution to their problems. And Africa, if we get to connect ourselves, we are able to industrialize ourselves and equally find the problems to our challenges.
Well, Duncan, you talk about, coming together and dealing with these issues. We've seen our nations, leaders do, tree planting exercises, give funds for promoting such activities, but then they end up in people's pockets. What assurance then do we have that we are actually going to fight this menace?
DAPHNE, to fight the interest of the people of Africa, especially related to the climate space. This is the discussion that was coming under adaptation and measure, where we don't need to have the funds that are meant to go for adaptation, the funds that are meant to go for mitigation measures, being got directly to government agencies. No. The negotiations that we had is we came to an agreement that a financing facility should be set that will be at a position to be accountable for getting the measures clearly, getting the adaptation, and funding the climate-related concerns. So probably if we believe that the finances coming from maybe these superior countries coming to our governments, we are sorry, we may not reach the solution, but let a facility that was agreed upon take its role and be accountable.
Well, Duncan, looking at it from your own perspective, how far are we, do you think, from achieving this goal of actually eradicating or rather countering these climate change, parks? We're seeing a lot of people dying in Kenya from hunger, drought, and a lot of relief food is being given, but we can say for sure that it is not as sufficient to, to sustain all of them.
To give a position into the same is the interest of many were that the African COP, the COP27 we call, was having a lot of ambitions. Africans were having a lot of ambitions. We believed that the four pertinent issues were to be considered, but surprisingly we left Sharm el-Sheikh a little bit disappointed. The solutions to the climate crisis that we're facing today can only be realized that if we as the local governments, let me put it right, the local governments to come out very well, the local authorities and the local leadership to come and realize that the problem is here with us. We did describe that climate change is a lion that has got into our house, and then we don't need someone from outside to come and move the lion outside our house. We need to start it by ourselves and let our governments feel it, let our governments be prepared that whatever we budget for, let us budget for the climate funds that can be able to help us adapt, mitigate, and equally find the solutions to our people who are dying out of hunger and through drought.
Duncan, even as we wind up, you as a member of the UNESCO, the UNESCO family, do you think your team, the UNESCO team, is doing enough to mitigate the effects of climate change?
DAPHNE, from the position at which we sit, I'm a researcher in the office of the UNESCO program. We've been able to come up with curriculum that will inform and teach from higher education level. We've cascaded down to secondary level, and we've cascaded down to primary level. The problem with our systems is that we are not moving to solution-based problems. To find solutions to our problems. So clearly from the position I sit, UNESCO has done a lot. We have a lot of information on climate change. We have a lot of information on how to combat desertification concerns. We are creating awareness. All over, if you walk, you can realize information about UNESCO coming out clearly. Information about UNESCO being held responsible. UNESCO itself is funding projects related to climate change. We are equally creating awareness, and we're giving out opportunities to the young youths to do more research and find the solutions to the problems we face.
Well, thank you so much, Duncan, for coming through. We are so glad that you are giving out this, you are sending out this clarion call for everybody to work together to mitigate climate change and not to be negligent, that it is something that occurs over years. It is here, and definitely the effects are being felt. Now, moving on, according to the Ministry of Interior Cabinet Secretary Kithure Kindiki, the government intends to give all chiefs powerful authority and the right to at least 5 police officers in order to empower the national government administrative officers and GAOs starting early January next year. During an impromptu visit to Mtwapa location, Chiefs Camp the CS reiterated the government's position that Ngao should keep off political activities.
Interior Cabinet Secretary Kithure Kindiki has announced changes to chiefs' administrative functions. Kindiki stated during an impromptu visit to a chief's office in Mtwapa, Kilifi County, that the government was considering to place 5 police officers under the command of each chief. The move, according to the CS, is part of the government's effort to reform the working environment of national government administrative officers in the country in order to enable them to enforce law and order.
We are working towards reorganizing ourselves between the GAO officers and the police to ensure, as it was before, that every chief has police officers attached to them to enable them be able to enforce law and order.
While admitting that the move will transform chiefs into powerful authorities, he denied that it is a plot to return the country to Moi's era when chiefs rode on excessive power.
Ni vizuri chief wawe na nguvu ili mambo ya usalama waunge mkono ile kazi inafanywa katika sekta ya usalama, na chief akiwa na nguvu ni nguvu ya kuhudumia wananchi. Umesikia ya kwamba serikali imesema haitaki machifu kuhusika katika maneno ya siasa ama maneno ambayo hayahusiani na kazi yao.
Kindiki directed the administrators to keep a daily record of the services provided to the general public. According to Kindiki, The register will be stored in drives to track the administrator's activities in a systematic manner. Kindiki added that the changes would help to foster professionalism in the operations of national administrative officers.
We will require every chief to prominently display the service charter so that wananchi can know what services are offered by the chief, the timelines taken to deliver that service, and if that service requires the payment of government fees, how much it is, so that we do not have any gray areas in terms of whether or not that service has a fee attached to it. In most cases, you find that the services required this level are free of charge.
In the operations of national administrative officers, Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua had previously stated that Ruto's government would protect chiefs' independence and would not use them for political purposes. For KUTV, I am Teresia Maluki.
Elsewhere, Maseno University DON Dr. Tom Boyer stated during a training and sensitization forum that the country has been hit by terrorism acts through recruitment of youths for a long time. South Nyanza journalists have been trained on the dynamic of violent extremism and poverty, joblessness, drug abuse, and the lack of community trust in the police force are some of the factors that have led to the youth recruitment into violent extremism. Boyer emphasized the importance of the media as a pillar in the fight against terrorism in identifying the drivers of violent extremism.
Therefore, as I said earlier on, the purpose of this training, therefore, as I said earlier on, is to make media fraternity develop in-house reporting tools within the guidelines of government laws so that they can report objectively on the occurrences of terror attacks and the drivers of our youth into violent extremism, to the extent that they don't enable terror organizations to take credit, but rather to diminish their prowess.
In other news, 3 individuals have been apprehended by police in Homa Bay County over the 4 stolen firearms at Kipasi police station by an unknown gang who raided the police station on Wednesday night. Homa Bay County Commissioner Moses Lidan said that they are holding the 3 and was confident that the rest will be nabbed as investigations progress. The administration said that they had scheduled a number of activities to recover the stolen firearms, including a search mission by the security team, adding they will be able to understand the incidents that led to the act of criminality as investigations continue.
Confirm that we lost 4 firearms. We are on with the search for the firearms since yesterday. The search is continuing now. Our target area, of course, is the general Kipasi area and its environs. And it is our belief that these firearms will be found safe and sound. The investigation also is ongoing.
Now, Kenyatta University Green Education Hub, under the theme Transforming Universities for a Changing Climate Project, held a hybrid event aligning with the 27th United Nations Climate Conference, COP27, where they discussed various ways in which university students can help in reducing the risk of climate change currently being witnessed in the country and various parts of the world. Eugene Mayabi prepared the story and now explains.
About climate, it's stewardship.
In an effort to combat the ongoing environmental degradation, Kenyatta University Green Education Hub, in collaboration with Kisii University and Kenya Methodist University, came together to discuss ways on how university students can help in reducing the climate effects, aligning with the 27th United Nations Climate, also referred to as COP27.
And the gap is that
in a move to ensure every student who joins the institution participates and gets to understand the whole climate effects, the universities have resorted to introduce the Environmental Science Common Unit in all first-year courses.
So universities are coming in to demystify
so that this knowledge is broken down to the lower level, and when now our graduates go back home to their respective communities, they can easily inform their neighbors in that simple language. Therefore, the community will understand.
According to the lecturers, universities have a big role to play in ensuring deforestation, decarbonization, fossil fuels and gas emissions, which have been termed as some of the main causes of climate crisis in the country, reduce significantly.
It is a dialogue that we have to get into. We have to provide leadership in it so that we're able to deal with this, and we provide this leadership through even our students, our interaction with our communities, and research that we do, and to know how various segments of society are affected by changing climate. And that's why we are taking our forefront in this.
COP27 has been an opportunity to review progress and identify issues that stand in the way of implementation of COP26 climate goals. Similarly, public service was urged to articulate and influence climate change action in the development agenda to improve quality of life in general.
The whole issue in the hub is to come up with ways of environmental advocacy, and not only advocacy, even planning for it, and then how do we do some implementation in terms of mitigation and adaptation. We are also informing them that these trees play a key role, because they are the ones which are sequestering the carbon which is produced to the atmosphere. So the lesser you cut, the more which remain, therefore they will be just sequestering this carbon and reducing from the atmosphere, therefore reducing global warming.
The universities also held a parallel international dialogue session with the University of Dar es Salaam and University College of London, where they shared ideas on various ways of combating climate change. Eugene Oyami, KUTV.
That aside, Mukurweini Dam in Mudengera, Laikipia West Sub-County, which is intended to service more than 4,500 families, has been designated for distilling by the government. Solar panels built in the area made the locals complain that the public involvement was not carried out, and that there was no way to kickstart water distribution in the dam and in its current condition. The Kenya National Commission on Human Rights Defenders claimed they had already written to the Central Rift Waterworks Agency demanding for prompt action, and noted that the residents' rights had been disregarded when they heard the people's yells. That aside, the Kenya Development Corporation has affirmed its commitment to address critical gaps in the market for long-term financing in sectors such as infrastructure, manufacturing and agro-industry that cannot be met by commercial banks. Speaking during the inaugural stakeholder engagement breakfast meeting to mark a year since the formal launch of the corporation, KDC Director General Christopher Hooker stated that the corporation aims to create sustainable strategic partnerships, both local and international, recognizing that in this 21st century, partnerships are critical for successful development as they provide expertise, technology, and financial resources, as well as shared knowledge that will translate to the growth of sectors providing the highest socio-economic returns.
Although KDC has inherited several challenges, it's also taking advantage of opportunities from the three former DFIs that include a strong balance sheet, products that include an economic stimulus package focused to recovery of the tourism sector, a line of credit from the Exim Bank of India to assist customers purchase machinery and equipment for their businesses, assets, ownership and staff, and with extensive expertise to provide solutions that address market failures. Today's stakeholder engagement underpins our mission, catalyzing sustainable socio-economic development by providing financial support and advisory services.
And now Pastor Dorcas Rigathi, wife to the Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua, has registered her disagreement with the recent ban of church crusades in Kisumu County over noise pollution. Mrs. Rigathi argues that freedom of worship is enshrined in the Constitution and should not be limited, adding that Kenyans need God's divine interventions to solve anti-social behaviors among the youth. Similar sentiments were initiated by Pastor Henry Mulandi, who now wants entertainment joints also banned. The two spoke in Thika at a pastors' meeting that was attended by 2,000 members of the clergy.
Is not going to change his word for you and I.
And let's now get sporty. The Federation of Kenya Football has wrapped up a 3-day training exercise for Kenya Premier League referees at the Kasarani Stadium. The exercise saw 80 referees drawn from the top-tier league taken through endurance and agility drills to test their physical ability ahead of the new season starting tomorrow. Elsewhere, Athletics Kenya is among the 6 finalists for the World Athletics 2022 Member Federation Award. The award credits a national governing body that has gone above and beyond to serve its athletes, fans, and the greater community. Athletics Kenya became the first member federation to sign the Sport for Climate Action Framework, stressing the governing body's position at the forefront of climate action in Kenya. The Federation has since installed 4 air quality sensors at Kasarani Stadium, Nyayo Stadium, Nairobi National Park, and Nakuru Athletics Club. Other federations that made the cut include that of Jamaica, Korea, Spain, Brazil, and Guam Federation. The winner will be announced early December. Elsewhere, Senegal have been handed an injury blow ahead of the World Cup, with their talisman Sadio Mane set to miss the coveted cup. A statement released by Bayern Munich earlier today states that the 30-year-old underwent a successful surgery on Thursday evening to reattach a tendon to the head of his right fibula. The African's Player of the Year suffered the injury in the last club match against Werder Bremen and will now miss the World Cup as he undergoes a rehabilitation process. Wrapping up our sports segments, it's now